This is such a long Perek. We're going to have to just jump right in and just hit the ground running because there is a ton of material here. So we are in Melachim Bet, chapter 17. It is a very tragic Perek. It is a very difficult topic. We are at the time of the end of the Northern Kingdom and the Golus of the 10 tribes. The exile of the 10 tribes is, it's like a historical tragedy, and we don't, there's a machloket in the Gemara about whether the 10 tribes will ever return. So, so much, legends about where are they and are they lost forever, and there's a machloket. Rabbi Akiva says they're lost forever. Rabbi Eliezer says they will come back when Mashiach comes, and there's many Gemaras talking about these inyanim. I don't know how much time we'll have to go through them. Let me just show you the outline of this parak. You see it has 41 psukim, so I'm going to talk really fast. If you can see, there's 3 sections here. The first section is the actual action, the last king of Israel, Hoshea ben Elah, and how the tribes go into Golus. The second section is a lengthy discussion of what went wrong and why the Jews ended up in Golus. And then the last section is the flip side of it, which is very weird and interesting. And so we'll try to take this bit by bit. First of all, in the previous paragraph, we were talking about the king of Yehuda, Achaz, who did so much damage. It's kind of unbelievable what he tore apart the southern kingdom. He made a mess over there. He defiled the Beis Hamikdash. He brought in Avodah Zarah. Really terrible stuff. And so we skipped the chapter. We've been counterpointing Yehuda and Yisrael. And so the last chapter was Yehuda, and this chapter is going to be basically the last chapter about the Northern Kingdom, about Israel. Now, the Northern Kingdom had like a brief flash of success in the time of the second Yerabam. And I'm going to show you the map here because maps are always very important. Map. Okay. So you see here, Aram, which is basically Syria, Aram had recaptured all this territory, right? And it was Yerovam II who had pushed Aram back. And what happens is, and we saw this in chapter 15, a series of political assassinations in the Northern Kingdom. It's like, the end of the dynasty of Yehu, after the Yerovam II and his son Zechariah, and then this series of, what should I call them, losers. Here we go. Here. This chart shows you here, we had Yerovam ben Yoash, Zechariah, Shalom, Menachem, and Pekachyahu. So we had, in a very short time, kingship after kingship, and then Pekach was king for 20 years, and Pekach had the weird idea that if he makes up with Aram, they can, be in alliance against Ashur, Assyria, which is getting to be a very, very powerful empire. And perhaps between Pekach and Rebbetzin, the king of Aram, perhaps together they can, make a dent against Ashur. This was a bad idea. So I need to go back with you. Let's do it here. I need to go back with you to chapter 15. to remind you of this story here. In the here, in the 52nd year of Azaryahu, Pekach ben Remaliahu became king over the northern kingdom in Shomron, and he was king for 20 years. He did evil in the eyes of God. He did not stray from the path of Yeroboam ben Nebat to cause Israel to sin. In the days of Pekach, okay, and this is where we start seeing the problem, Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Ashur, came, and he took over Iyun, Avel, Beth-Macha, Yanoach, Kedesh, Chatzor, Gilad, and Galil, all the land of Naphtali, and he exiled them to Ashur. Okay, if you want to go back for one moment, you see here Menachem had tried to bribe Ashur. He took out all the money and he gave him 50. One second. He gave to Pul, the king of Ashur, right, 1,000 talents of silver. So you see that the power of Assyria is coming against them. So first we had Pul, and Menachem tried to bribe him, and now we have Tiglath-Pileser, and he just comes in, right? He gets very angry at this pair, Pekach ben Remaliahu and Rebbetzin. He kills Rebbetzin, takes over Aram, and comes in and conquers a bunch of stuff in the northern kingdom and sends them to Ashur. At that time, Vayikshor Kesher Hoshea ben Ela Pekach ben Remaliahu Yakei Mitzei Vayimloch Tachta B'Shnat Teshuvah Yotza ben Uziel. Okay, so our king that we're going to be looking at, that is Hoshea ben Ela, the last king of Israel, he sees how Pekach has been messing up. So he assassinates Pekach, and he tries his own system. Now, I just want to show you, I think it's here. Okay. You see here. The cities that were taken by Ashur. It's two maps back to back. Let's see which is clearer. So we have here Chatzor, and maybe the other one is better. Okay. Okay, the cities that were taken into exile in the time of Pekach, okay, that's Abel Beth-Macha, Iyon, and Noah, Kedesh, Chatzor. This is the Gilad, which is on the Golan Heights area, and the Galil. This is like a huge bunch of territory that are taken over to Ashur. And this just is mentioned in chapter 15 and sort of, we move along. So let's go back to our chapter 17. Bearing in mind that there has been already galut, there has already been exile. And now we're going to look at it in more depth. Okay, Pasuk Aleph. Okay, when Achaz was king for 12 years, Hoshea became king in Shomron for 9 years. So there's a lot of discrepancies in the years. We really don't have time to go into it. It's a lot of theories, but it's very unclear. The king's time periods were measured against each other, and they're, some of them are very not clear. In any event, Pasuk Bet. Vayas harabi Hashem rak lo k'malchi Yisrael shayu l'fanav. He did evil in the eyes of God. I'm just not as bad as everyone who came before him. Now, let's talk about this for a moment. Every single king of the northern kingdom, okay, and that's, there's that beautiful chart here. All of these guys, everyone has the same kind of phrase. They did not abandon the sins of Yerovam ben Nevat, who caused sin to all of Israel. So starting with Yerovam, going all the way through, all of them were evil. You didn't find one good guy here. You found maybe some more effective kings. Ahab and Yerovam II, they were effective kings. However, tzaddikim, none of them. And they're all referencing Yerovam. So what was Yerovam's, excuse the expression, original sin? Yerovam set up golden calves in Dan and in Beit El to prevent the Jewish people from going to Yerushalayim. This was a political move. You have to understand, he was afraid that the Jews would go back to the southern kingdom. Here's Yerushalayim. If people come from the north to Yerushalayim, like, what do they need him for? So he put the golden calves in Beit El and Dan, and those golden calves persisted until this time. Now, according to Rashi and the other commentaries, and you can see it right in the text as well, right? Hosea ben Be'eri, the Navi, says that the Egels, here, I have it here for you. 1 second. Right? Begat al Ta'id b'chol tivku b'beit l'afra afar palashti. Bar ad Yehuda nagad sharami ad Yishalayim. Evri lachem yoshevet shafir. He talks about this gullus, and he wails, and he talks about the sadness of something shomor le'i hasadeh. Right. This is the beginning of Micha. And it describes how the golden calves were taken captive. Now, if we think about this, it makes sense, because if Tiglath-Pileser comes and there's this massive golden statues, why not just scoop them up and take them to Ashur? That's a lot of money. So let's take a look at our hero here, Hoshea. He wasn't as bad as the other kings. Why? Right? Shabitel Pardisot. Okay, or Metzudas David has a better language. Hashomrim Shahoshiv Yerovam L'Val Yalu Yerushalayim. In other words, from the time of Yerovam and Nebat, this whole thing is about 240 years, the Jewish people were prevented by certain guards that Yerovam had set up from going to the Beis Hamikdash. So now that the idols have been taken into captivity, right? The Eglei Zahav Kfar Galu, right? And all that they had taken now, they took in Dan, they took the idol from Dan, and then in Gilad and Galil, they took the idol from Beit El. So now, why set up guards to prevent people going to Yerushalayim? So Hoshea's big righteous move is that he removes the guards and he says to the people, you want to go to Yerushalayim? Go to Yerushalayim. I'm not going to stop you. However, he does not actively encourage it. So he's really, to say that a person is better than Yerovam ben Nevat is really not a great praise, not as bad as the others. Great tzidkus. But the really sad part about this story is, all of a sudden, the Jews in the north are told, if you want to go to the Beis Hamikdash, you can. And they don't. They don't take advantage of this opportunity. They've lost interest. They're not connected. And this is the real problem. Because we can analyze why they went into Gullus. And we can say, well, 50 years of assassinations, murders, and new kingships will destabilize. And the civil wars that went on in the Northern Kingdom, that's a problem. Or we can say that none of these leaders in the Northern Kingdom had the understanding that you are standing on the edge of a cliff. And if you don't pull back, and if you don't fix things, you're all going to fall over the cliff. So these are two really big problems. The civil wars, I should say, in the Northern Kingdom, and the inept kings who don't realize anything. But the bottom line is the people do not go. The people do not connect to Hashem. It's been too long, too much water under the bridge. Nothing moves them. Sadly enough, we will find in the next chapter when Hizkiyahu does his major reformation and tshuva movement in the Southern Kingdom, we find that he encouraged the people that were left to come, and they didn't. So let's just talk about the gullahs for a second. I just want to get this out there so you'll understand the way it works. First of all, make a map here. Okay. Before we get into the psukim, I'll just show you on the map so you'll know what's going on here. Okay. Here's Israel down here. Excuse me. This is the Galil. This is the Shomron. This is Ashur. Here's Nineveh of Yonah fame. Now, in this map, which I took from that Mikra, you see the straight arrows and the dotted arrows. The straight arrows are going, these cities that were taken, this is listed here. Iyun, Abel-Ismacha, Yanoah, Kedesh, Naphtali, Hatzor. Here we have Gilad, and here we have the Galil. All of these places that were taken into exile followed those straight arrows up to Hamat, Karkamish, Gozan, Chabor, Ninveh, Chalech, and then all the way east to Madai, Media. And we have here a feature of the Assyrian Empire was that they did transfer populations. In other words, they emptied out the area of Shomron and they took these people into exile. At the same time, they took people from other places and they sent them into Shomron. So if you see the arrows that are broken arrows, a broken line, they take them from here. They take them from Kuta, right? They take them from Bavel. They take them in this direction, coming here from Tadmor, by way of Aram Damasek, and he settles them in Shomron. So what is he doing and why is he doing it? Okay. And I shouldn't say he, because all the kings of Ashur have the same program. The idea is that if you take the population out of its land and move it someplace else, you will weaken the unity of that nation. You will weaken their connection to their land. You'll put them in a place where they have to struggle to survive. And you will create a situation where they simply cannot rebel. And this was the plan of Ashur. Now, if you want to make a parallel, okay, we have this mess in Asa, okay, and Trump was floating all these ideas like, let's get rid of all the Azatim and put them in, I don't know where, Indonesia. It's fine by me, but no one asked me. The problem is, right, then the rest of the hypocrites in the world jump up and say ethnic cleansing. Well, by the way, it's only 2,000 years old, and it actually works. This is one of the very sad things about the exile of the 10 tribes. They are scattered, they are dispersed. We don't know where they are. But back at home, I'm just giving you the scenario, and we'll look at the psukim. Back at home, the tribes that are settled in Shomron have their own issues and their own things. But we have to understand that it's not like everybody's gone. Okay, they take the people who are the most powerful and the ones who might make the trouble, and your simple farmers are left there. Now, if you are a Jew living in the Northern Kingdom, watching the Northern Kingdom crumble and be dispersed, okay, probably the most logical thing for you to do would be to migrate to the Southern Kingdom. So it seems as if, for our understanding, the tribe of the Shevet of Yehuda is the one that's left standing in the Southern Kingdom, but it's not just Yehuda. First of all, most of Binyamin stayed with Yehuda. Also, we have many people of the tribe of Levi, and then every other tribe that had like remnants that migrated to Yehuda are there also, which means that there are people of all the tribes as part of the Jewish nation. But at this point in time, we don't know who's who. We know who's Levi, we know who's Cohen, but we don't know anything else. So it's an interesting question what actually happened. But now I just wanted you to understand the logic of the Assyrians. Okay, so Hoshea ben Elah, he thinks that he can, get around the Assyrians. And we have Assyrian sources that they've shown that the king of Assyria says, I exile 27,290 Jews. It's a lot of Jews, right? In the Gullus Babel later, it's 10,000, the first Gullus. That's the numbers that they give, which is very interesting. It seems as if Hoshea ben Elah totally misreads the map, and he thinks that he can play games with this empire. Okay, and he tries. First of all, he's very submissive, and he pays them their taxes. They call it mincha. Mincha is a gift. This is no gift. This is a tax, a tribute, whatever you want to call it. And if you didn't give it, oy vavoy. So when Hoshea thinks that he's going to have monkey business with the king of Egypt to fight against Ashur, the Assyrians hear about it, and that's when they act. Pasuk Gimel. Alav Allah Shalmaneser melech Ashur, v'hila Hoshea Eved v'ashev lo mincha. Shalmaneser comes against Hoshea, and Hoshea becomes his servant, and he returns him the mincha, the taxes. And the Malbim says, what do you mean he returns? He returns it because he had back taxes that he hadn't paid. So he pays all of this stuff. But this man is not a fool. Pasuk Daled, Vayimtza melech Ashur b'Hoshea kesher. Kesher is a knot, also in Hebrew, a conspiracy. He finds out that there's a conspiracy. Asher shalach malachim el So melech Mitzrayim. He sent messengers to the king of Egypt, whose name was So. I really think that's a great name. It's among my favorites. There is in Yoshua, the king of Hebron is called Hoham. So that is my all-time favorite. Hoham is a great name, but So, I mean, it sounds like, the sound of music. So, king of Mitzrayim. I'm sorry. Aside for favorite names that I have in the Tanakh. Anyway, he makes a conspiracy with So, the king of Mitzrayim. He stopped giving the tribute. And these Assyrians like their money. They took those golden calves, not enough for them. They want more money. He arrests him and he puts him in prison. Now he comes against the whole land. So he comes against the whole northern kingdom, conquers it very handily, right? Shomron is a tougher nut. The city, the capital city itself, takes him 3 years of a siege to come against Shomron. But in the last year of Hoshea, Pasuk Vav, B'shnat HaTshir l'Hoshea l'chad melech Ashur et Shomron v'yegel es Yisrael Ashura. In the 9th year of Hoshea, right, which is the last year of Hosea, the king of Ashur captured Shomron and took all of Israel into exile to Ashur. By Yoshev Otam Bachlach v'Chavor Nahar Gozan v'Arei Madai, the places I showed you on the map. This is the very sad end of the 10 tribes of the kingdom of Shomron. And we don't know what happens to Hosea himself, but he is imprisoned and taken captive, and that's about the end of him. Now, the next section of this Perek, of this chapter, is a long discussion of all the things that led up to the exile of the 10 tribes and their final punishment. It starts at Pasuk Zayin, it goes to Pasuk Chaf Gimel, and we're going to try to, put together this picture. Pasuk Zayin. Vayihi ki chatu b'nei Yisrael Hashem Elokehem hama'alel tamei eretz Mitzrayim mitachat yad Paro melech Mitzrayim vayiru Elohim achirim. In a very short note, like Melachim doesn't do this. This is like a kind of chumashi and maybe Shmuel kind of phrase. By the way, Hashem took you out of Egypt, took you out from under the thumb of Paro, and you served other gods. Number one sin, lack of gratitude. Where is your hakaras hatov? Where is your care about the Jewish people? What have you done? And then we start with hakaras hatov. And there seems to be a betrayal of God in the sense that I made you my special people. I took you out of slavery. This never happened before. All those nisim, and you turn your back on me and go to other gods who didn't help you, can't help you. What are you doing? Now, Chukot HaGoyim is a very common phrase. We've seen this before. The laws of the nations that God had thrown them out from before the sons of Israel and the kings of Israel that they had done. So it's a strange kind of construction here, but it seems as if the kings of Israel and the people of Israel are behaving in the manner of the nations that God took out of the land of Israel because of them. So here's another important thing that comes out of this chapter, and that is the land of Israel isn't like any place else. It's a holy land. We use that term, we throw it around. What does it really mean? It really means that certain things cannot be tolerated in the land of Israel. For example, the idolatry, the depravity of the 7 nations, the child sacrifice, the moral degeneration, the depravity, all this stuff. Hashem says, I am going to give you this land, and you're going to get rid of those people who did these terrible things, and it's not going to be like that anymore. And that's the thing. The kings of Israel and the people of Israel did the same abominations. So why would I give you a land, Hashem says, if you do the same thing that I threw these people out from? Eretz Yisrael is not like any other land. It's like a person with a sensitive stomach. If you have a person, what they call a cast iron stomach, he can eat anything, all the junk. Forgive me, Neely. Okay, a person like that can eat anything. But if you have a sensitive stomach, you're easily upset. And that's the land of Israel. The land of Israel cannot handle evil. And the evil and the depravity and the child sacrifice, all this stuff is terribly disturbing to the land of Israel. It's not in my holy land. And we'll see how this plays out later with the nations that Ashur brings in. They also have to learn this lesson. The land of Israel is not like any place else. Meantime, Vayichapu b'nei Israel dvarim asher lo kain al Hashem Elokeihem. Now, the word vayichapu comes from to cover, to conceal. And we in the Megillah, in the Megillus Esther, Pnei Haman chafu. After the king is angry at him, and they cover his face. So we have here the children of Israel now make up all kinds of lies about God. And what are their lies? Okay, it's an interesting thing. I mean, we don't have really time to go into the different commentaries, but the idea is they say God doesn't care, God's not interested, he's not watching us, he has nothing to do with us, or he's tired of us, or whatever other things like give them the excuse to leave Hashem. So that's what they do. And they built high places in all their cities, in all their watchtowers, in every fortified place. So if they set up a watchtower for a guard to guard their crops, let's say, they put there also an idol, just to be sure. And a bama is a high place. So the bamot were like the least of the sins of all the idolatry, because the bama could have been set up to serve Hashem as well. But here you see that they go out to town on it. It's not just a bamot to serve God. They set up pillars, and the Asherah is that tree god. On every hill and under every tree, it spreads out all around Avodah Zarah, everywhere. Pasuk Yud Aleph, vayikatru sham b'chol bamot kagoyim asher glosha mipneihem. And they did the incense ceremonies in all these places, just like the nations that Hashem had sent out from before them. And now it gets worse. The progression here is from bad to worse. They did bad stuff to anger God. So, what does that mean? Marikara says that sodomy, all kinds of evils. It's not just their idol worship, but their interpersonal relations and all kinds of their morality. It's completely falling apart. Now, Gilulim, according to Mitsudas, is from the same word as like Soah, like the serving like gods of excrement. So not nice. And then Barbanel says, like, if you're serving something that's totally disgusting, it just shows how debased you are. You'd give them by Yad Hashem Yisrael Yehuda Yad Kol Nevi'eh Kol Choseh Kol Nevi'ab, right? God warned them in the hands of all of his prophets, Lamor, saying, Shuvu midarcheichem harayim, v'shivu mitzvosai v'kuvotzai, v'chol haTorah shetzivisi avotechem, asher shalachti aleichem b'yad avadai adviyim. And Hashem wants to bring them back, and he sends them Nevi'im, messengers, come back. Now, we have gone through Melachim. We have seen different types of Nevi'im. We've seen Eliyahu with his hardcore anger, right? We've seen Elisha with his gentle approach. So many other Nevi'im at this time, Hosea, Amos, Yonah. And the Jewish people don't listen. Pasuk Yud Below Shamein. Not interested. Now, if you recall, the prophecy of Yonah to Nineveh, one of the things that Yonah has trouble with is, if I go to Nineveh and they do tshuva, I say, guys, in Nineveh, God is angry at you, and they do tshuva, how bad will it look for the Jews that the Medrash says God sends prophets morning and evening, and they don't care. But Yakshuat Arpam, Pasuk Yud, they harden their necks, like their stiff-necked fathers. Asher lo heminu b'Hashem Elokeihem. They didn't believe in God either. And the Farshim say this is a reference to the original golden calf. What is a stiff neck? A stiff neck means you can't turn around and look in the back. You can't react to what happened. You can't have remorse. They rejected God's laws and the covenant that he had with their fathers and all of the testimonies. They went after Hebel, Hebel meaning worthless things, transient things, and they became worthless. And they followed all the non-Jews that God said, don't do like them. So it's really kind of sad, and it's kind of horrible. And we have to learn that, read the signs, pay attention. But Baruch was talking to us when we see October 7th, for example. We cannot remain indifferent. We can't be apathetic and say, well, it's just a thing that happened. We have to see all the events of history as Hashem giving us signs, telling us, giving us warnings. But the Jewish people are stiff-necked, they're stubborn, they don't listen. It's very sad. Pasuk Tetzai, Vayazvu et kol mitzvot Hashem Elokehem, vayasulu lahem masecha, shnei agalim. Now we're going more specific. They left all the mitzvot and they went and they made these two calves. Vayasu Asherah, and they made the Asherah gods, the tree gods. Vayashtachavu l'chol tzvah Shemar, they bowed down to all the hosts of heaven. Vayavdu et habal, I guess, beyond the Asherah, beyond the golden calf, which you might say is a vehicle toward God, which you might say this, you might see the sun as a vehicle toward God. Once you get to the Baal, there's no more excuses. Baal is just plain, nonsense, avodah zarah. And then it gets worse. Pasuk Yud name is benoteim ba'esh. They took their sons and their daughters through the fire. Again, we mentioned Molech recently, talking about the Molech is one of the worst avodah zarahs, and it's not clear if they just passed the children through the fire or if they actually burnt the children alive. But anyway, you slice it, it was a horrific thing, very, very difficult thing. Kesem. Kesem is a magic, right? Maxim, by the way, means charming. Kesem is charm. They did divination. Now the word makru is very interesting because it's literally they sold themselves to do evil before in the eyes of God, to anger God. In other words, they're committed to this. In modern Hebrew, lahit makar means to be addicted. It's very, very interesting derivation where it's like you sold yourself to the devil, so to speak. You can't go back. And it's really horrific. They at some point they make this transition and they abandon everything. And you see that there's a progression. They start with this, they abandon the chukot. The Das Sofrim says the chok is the things you don't understand. So instead of saying, wow, God's ways are too hard for me to understand, so I won't do it. Right? They say, well, I don't understand them. Why should I do it? And they just they pick and choose. One of the things that we must never do is say, this part of Torah is good, this part of Torah is not good. It's a package deal. You might say, let's be honest, you might say, well, this mitzvah, too hard for me. I'm not ready for it, which is a better way of saying it. I'm going to work up to that. You could say, I'm not up to that. I'm not on that level. But you can't say, I don't believe in this one. I don't believe in that one. It's a package deal. And Hashem gets very angry. Vayetanach Hashem od b'Yisrael. He's very angry. Vayisirei me'al panav. And he removes them from before his face. Lo nishar rak shevet Yehuda levado. This is a difficult pasuk. Let's stop for a second. He removed them from his face. What does that mean? And Basically, we're saying that Hashem separated himself from the 10 tribes in a way that's very, very final. So, let me see. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, בואו ראה כמה חביב את ישראל לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, שבכל מקום שגלו שכינה עמהם. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, look how much Hashem loves Jewish people. Any place they went into Gullus, Hashem went with them. Galul Mitzrayim, Shechina Imahem, Shenemar, Haniglo Niglei Tzvei Avicha, L'biyotam Mitzrayim. Galul Babel, Shechina Imahem, Shenemar, L'manchem Shulachti Babela. Right? In the future, when they're going to have their redemption, it says, V'shav Hashem Elokecha Shmutcha. The Heshiv, it doesn't say he will bring you back. It says he will come back. Right? This is the concept of God being in Gullus with us. We do not see this with the 10 tribes. God sends them from his space, which most of the commentaries understand to mean from the land of Israel. This is where the presence of God is, and God says, goodbye. I don't want to see you. This is a terrible punishment. And we've seen a lot of tragedy in Judaism over the centuries, but this has to be the start of something that we don't know how this is going to end. We don't know where these people are. Such a huge chunk of Jews gone, and God is sending them away. We know that Hashem is with us in our exile, but it doesn't seem at all clear that God is with them, and that's really tragic. Now we're going to turn to Yehuda. Yehuda's no better. They're also sinning. And Hashem is so angry. Pasuk Chav. God was so angry, rejected all of the Jews, afflicted them, gave them over to plunderers until he just threw them away. Because Hashem, Israel tore itself away from the house of David. They put up Yerovam ben Nevat, who made them, they caused them all to sin. At this point in time, after all the punishments, all the attempts, all the mercy, all the nisim, Elisha and his miracles, Eliyahu and his punishments, all of the various events that happen, it's over. And the Jewish people are sent into Gullus. It's a very, very terrible thing. You have to look at this and say, right, the ultimate goal of all of these punishments is that the people should do tshuva. But we don't know how this goes down. We don't know what's the answer here now. Here in Sanhedrin, right? Vayashlichem al eretz acheret kayom hazeh, says in Devarim. The question is asked, they're not going to come back, right? Because they were thrown to a different land like this day. This is the machlokas in the Gemara that I mentioned to you. The 10 Shvatim, will they ever come back? Rabbi Akiva says the expression, God threw them to another land, kayom hazeh, like this day, because a day goes and never comes back, they are not coming back. But Rabbi Eliezer says, no, days get darker and then it gets light again. They will come back. So we're going to go with Rabbi Eliezer. Be'ezrat Hashem, we should all be zocha. The last part of this Perek is this weird story of the Kutim. Okay, now I showed you on the map Can I show you this map? Here, this map. That the Kutim were among the nations that the Assyrians brought into the lands of Israel. And the Kutim seem to have been the biggest group because from now on, their whole group is called Kutim, even though they came from Ava and Svarbi. I don't know how to say that. Svarbayim, Ava, Hamat, Bavel, all different places, but they were given the generic name Kutim. And some called them Shomronim because they settled in the area of Shomron. And in English, that's called Samaritans. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Samaritans. The Samaritans still exist till today. They have a sect that's on Shomron. They have many similar customs to Jews. They're not considered Jews. And they seem to be, these are the people. They came into the land. Pasuk Chaf Daled. Vayavei Melech Ashur miBavel mikuta me'ava mechamat u'sefarvayim. I see Sfarvayim. Vayoshev be'orei Shimon tachas b'nei Israel. Tachas b'nei Israel means instead of b'nei Israel. The king of Ashur brought all these tribes from other places and settled them in Shomron instead of the Jews. But Yeshu Shomron Yeshu Barer. They inherited the land and they dwelt there. Now Shomron had been destroyed after the 3-year siege of Shalmaneser. So the city itself is gone, but the whole area at Har Shomron till today, the Shomronim lived there. Now this becomes very bizarre. Pasuk Chafei. At the beginning of their settlement there, they did not fear God, and we're talking about Hashem here, the real God. Okay. And God sent against them lions, and the lions killed them. This is very bizarre. What? And the servants of the king of Ashur came to him, right? And they said, the people that you settled in the land of Israel are having a lot of trouble. They don't know how to deal with the God of that land, and he's sending lions against them. And they're getting killed by lions because they don't know how to serve God. This raises a lot of questions. Very bizarre. First of all, why is God sending lions against them? I mean, what does God actually expect from them? They're not Jews. And it seems as if, we mentioned earlier, I said I'm going to show you later on in the Perek, the land of Israel is not like any other land. You want to sit in Asher and Babel and serve your idols? Okay, I don't like it, but there it is. But you coming into my holy land, Hashem says, you can't serve idols the way you do over there, over here. Not going to fly. This is the holy land. So the king of Ashur doesn't want his subjects getting killed by lions. So he has this plan. Take one of their Kohanim that's from the exile, bring him back there, and let him teach them how to do their religion. So they brought back one of the Kohanim that they had exiled from Shomron. He settled in Beit El, and he taught them how to fear God. This is actually, to me, it's kind of amusing because they're not Jewish. However, there are some things that they have to do, and that is to fear Hashem. And it's very interesting because they didn't fear Hashem. Why? Rashi says they didn't fear Hashem because they said, if God's people went into exile, then God is not powerful enough to stop that, and therefore their God has no power. You realize that the pagans think that like every nation has their God, Some gods are better than others. Some gods are stronger than others. A Jewish God let his people go into exile, and therefore he is powerless. So they don't fear God. Now the Cohen goes back and says, listen, by the way, the lions that came after you, that is not a normal thing. The Medrash tells us that the lions killed people but did not eat them. We had a similar thing back at the beginning of Melachim, right? A lion kills for food. It doesn't kill stop. So if the lions came and killed them without actually taking food, then this is something supernatural. And all of a sudden they realize, they really should fear this God. However, and this is very strange, it's not like Jews. God says, you owe me total allegiance. You can't serve God. Eliyahu says, there's God and there's idols. There's Baal and there's God. There's not this. You can't do both. You can't hedge your bets that way. But it seems like for the Kutim, it's okay. As long as you have a proper awe and respect for God, who is the supreme God, I don't really care if you have your idols. Pasuk Chaptet. Vayu osim goy goy Elohav. Vayanichu b'beit hamamot asher asu hashamorim goy goy bareim asher im yashub sham. So we have here, an opposition. You have here learning to fear God, and also everyone with their idol, and it gets very weird. And the people above it, Pasuk Lamed, Anshe Babel asu Sukkot benot, which is like chickens. Anshe Kut asu et nergal, which is a rooster. Anshe Chamat asu is a shima, which I believe is a donkey. A goat. Shima's a goat. And the Avim did, Avim asu nivchas, and nivchas is a dog, and tartak, that's the donkey. Hasvar bim sorfim et b'neim ba'esh l'adar melech v'anamelech. Adar melech is a mule, and anamelech is a horse, and they had these idols, and they actually burnt their children to them. They all had their weird avodah zaras, but they feared God. So it seems as if Kadosh Baruch Hu is not telling these people that you have to be exactly like Jews, because they're not. And he's not telling them, you have to totally fear me and get rid of all your idols. Saying, keep your idols, but know who's in charge of this land. This is a holy land. Pasuk Lamed Bet, Vayihu Yereim et Hashem Vayasulam Miktosam Kohanei Bamot Vayuosim Lahem Bebeit HaBamot. They had their own Kohanim, but they feared God. Pasuk Lamed Bet, it's Hashem Yereim et Elohim Vayuotim. They feared God and they served their idols. Just like the nations where they were exiled from. Now, if you watch the language here, okay, till today, they do this kind of laws. And they don't do the laws and the customs of the Torah like God commanded the sons of Yaakov. So this is a kind of convoluted pasuk. Like what's actually saying here? It's saying they feared God, but not like the Jews, or the way the Jews are supposed to fear God. So they have this sort of respect, but they're not really. And the Mefarshim say perhaps this is actually a little bit of a dig at the Jews that were exiled from there. Like the law of the Goyim Asher Heglu Etzam Misham, maybe like the people that were sent into exile that should have been doing this. They didn't do it like that. So we don't know. Hey. Who did God make a covenant with? With us. Don't fear other gods. Don't bow down to them. Don't serve them. Don't sacrifice to them. You're supposed to be, you Jews, you're supposed to be serving only God. He took you out of Egypt with his strong hand. He's the one you're supposed to fear. Pasuk Lamed Zayin. Et hachukim et hamishpatim ha'torah ha'mitzvah shekatzav lachem tishmeru l'asot kol yamim v'lo tiru elohim achirim. There's sort of been this like a weird kind of jump from the Kutim and all this weird stuff the Kutim do back to God saying, you Jews, you should have done it right. You should have done what I told you. We had this whole covenant and all these laws and the Torah and the mitzvah. I should not have feared other gods. You're not supposed to forget the covenant, and you should not serve other gods. If you serve God, He will save you from your enemies. And they didn't listen, but they did like their original laws, which is strange, right? They didn't want to cling to God the way they should have. Pasuk Mem Aleph. Moving back to the Kutim, the Samaritans, the Shomronim, these people feared God in their own weird way. They serve their idols, right? And also, this continued generation after generation. And this is where we see that, and there's a great debate in the Gemara. I'll just give you the short version. We're like out of time. That these nations who were similar to the Jews, who feared God, who did some mitzvot. If you go to the Shomronim, they have a Korban Pesach. It's very interesting. Some of their mitzvot they do, like our mitzvot, even more strict, more stringent than we do. It's very, very, very interesting. But the debate in the Gemara is, are they Jewish? Are they Jewish enough to marry Jews? And the conclusion is no. I think this is where no. And open a lot of stuff here. Okay, I gotta let you go. In other words, the bottom line is the Kutim, the Shomronim, they're not accepted as Jews. They're not allowed to intermarry. And in fact, in the time of Ezra, when the Jews come back to rebuild the temple, they make a lot of trouble. They act more like enemies than allies. And so the king of Ashur really accomplished what he set out to do. He really made a mess here. Sancheriv confused everything. One of the things that we see that Sancheriv accomplished here is that the confusion of the tribes within us, like nobody really knows who's who. It was at this time that there was this general confusion. In any event, this is the sad end of the Northern Kingdom and the very effective and terrible policies of the Assyrians. And the next time we will move on to something much, much more, what shall we say, uplifting, and that is King Chizkiyahu, who is a very great and righteous king, hits the ground running, realizing that religious reform is urgent, and I do want to make one more point, and that is that nearly go off. The Barbanel says that the generation of Hoshea ben Elah was not like Hoshea ben Elah was he did this one good thing that he allowed them to go back to the Beis Hamikdash. But the Abarbanel says the cumulative effect of all the sins was such that they couldn't really fix themselves. And the Abarbanel makes a comparison to diet. Very interesting. That's what I'm looking for Neely, but I think she had to go. If a person eats an unhealthy diet and neglects his health his whole life, if he, gets to the age of 80 and says, now I'm going to eat healthy, it might be too late to fix the damage. He probably cannot fix the decline at the end. And that's what seems to have happened with the 10 tribes. You need to have lifelong good habits and physical and spiritual as well. So this is our sad story, and I'm going to hope that Rabbi Eliezer is right. 10 tribes will come back. We do see Jews coming from all kinds of crazy places all over the world. And Bezrat Hashem, Kibbutz Goliot, Mashiach's time, and we want to hopefully live to see that happen. Next Perek will be a little more uplifting, as I said. Bezrat Hashem. Okay, ladies, have a good night.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Be well. Take care. Bye-bye.